Let me take you back to 2005. I was flying along with my backseater, my weapons systems operator. We also had our wingman next to us a few hundred feet out there, flying over the skies of Iraq. We're trying to find out where the friendlies are, where the enemy is. We're starting to run low on gas because we weren't expected to be in that situation today. Weather's moving in, clouds, which means we have to fly lower and lower to the ground. And as if that wasn't enough, we still have to fly these high-performance machines that are going at 300, 400 miles per hour with all the displays and all the sounds and all the bells and whistles throwing all that information at us. It's chaos. When I was telling you that story, what words do you think about? Change. Yes, dynamic. What about complex and uncertainty? Isn't your world the same way? In the human mind, we get in those environments, it's going to produce what we call human error. Unintended consequences or actions. In your world, it can mean losses, and in some of you, it can also mean injury or loss of life. So as leaders, we have to understand what that does. Human factors is really the study of how we as humans interact with our environments, right? So this desk, this equipment we're using, those laptops, cars we drive. We always discuss this when we talk about our technology, but rarely do we talk about it when we talk about leadership or leading our teams. We started to notice that there was something there. There was something there that leaders had to understand. And what that was the human factors of leadership, a mindset, a framework for you as leaders on how we lead our people through these environments. And human factors leadership has 4 main parts. Now, no shock here that this starts with a clear focus and alignment, with clear intent. Think about all the distractions your team has. What are the biggest distractions in their cockpit? What's the most important priorities for your people and your teams? There's nothing special about the human beings we were, but we discovered the power of situational awareness. How we make better decisions, rapid decisions. What if my engine catches on fire? What if the weather changes? So what if? And you can't think of everything, but it does help you cage your mind so that you're more proactive versus reactive to change. Embedding a culture of mutual support. It is no longer about you. It is no longer about your success, about what you do, but it's about the success of your team. It's a deep level peer accountability. You have to adopt a debrief culture. After every single sortie I ever did as a fighter pilot, we always went in a room and we talked about what happened. We conducted a debrief. What went right, what went wrong, why did it go right or wrong, but more importantly, how is the team going to get better next time? You've got to set that tone of accountability. Get out of the blame and train approach. This is a learn and growth culture here.
When you actually look at the leadership qualities, they translate into the civilian world.
Brandon's speech was absolutely terrific, energetic, and a lot of enthusiasm.
We don't manage people, we lead people. And the only way to lead people is with a tactical focus. And that's the mindset you have to have. Now think about operating with a formation of 2 or 3 other jets that you're responsible for, you're leading, right. And you're going into environments, whether it's weather, whether it's combat, now you're worried about, the enemy, whether it's terrain if you're flying down low, and you're trying to organize this mission and keep all these pieces going. Meanwhile, this airplane's throwing all this data at you. I mean, it's just not an environment that the human brain was ever designed to operate. My mission or my goal with my speaking through keynotes, workshops, and leadership coaching is developing leaders of high-performing and high-reliability organizations. So building high-performing leaders. And that's through all aspects of leadership, from helping people drive their focus, their clear intent for their teams, as I call it, decision-making, situational awareness, driving accountability through mutual support. And then probably the most important thing is how we improve or how our teams improve through the debrief, the fighter pilot debrief. So obviously my everything I do is number one, based on my time as a fighter pilot, how we operated, led, executed in very dynamic, uncertain, and complex environments, because that's the type of environments that most all leaders operate in some form today. But also it's based on the science behind why that works. So I'm also a professor in human factors, which human factors is really the study of why we as humans make certain decisions we do, how those environments affect us, and why we make decisions, and what affects us, and what drives what we call human error. So being a professor in that for almost 14 years now, and then my time as a fighter pilot and in aviation and everything else, combining those two, how we build our leaders to lead high-performing teams, but also, like I said, it's the science behind it. So how leaders, because I always say that, and it's called human factors leadership because leaders have to understand the human factors of leadership. And that's how we really drive better performance within our teams. Because I always say this, but no professional shows up to work saying, I'm going to make a mistake or I'm going to have a bad day today, right? There's always some human factor there, whether it's fatigue, mental, physical, complacency, lack of communication, something that's distracting us from making the right decision there. So that's what I do. That's how I talk to, again, keynotes and workshops primarily, and also leadership coaching is what I do. Outside. So I grew up in Fett County, Fayetteville, Georgia.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where I grew up. Graduated high school. I won't say the year. I'm just kidding.
Probably close to where I graduated, so I think we're good.
Graduated high school, went on to the United States Air Force Academy, is where I went to college. Obviously served in the Air Force. I was active duty for about 12 years. Got married also in there in the early days of the Air Force. We had our first child, my daughter, when I was still in the Air Force, and then we got out. Had my son soon after we got out. After that, as we were talking about earlier, became a major airline pilot as well. Moved back to the Atlanta, Georgia area. Started my business around that same time, or got into the speaking business, I should say, around that same time. So again, been doing that since 2013 in that business as well, about the same time as airlines and everything else. So that's who I am, where I come from, what I do. But to answer your question, I just said I have a daughter and a son.
Yes.
So my daughter, she is 15. My son is 11. And Saturdays and everything we do is really spent. They're in that age now where they're full up into activities, whether it's dance for my daughter,
love it,
my son, and right now soccer and basketball, and he's always into something. A lot of times with him was coaching, helping out with that, doing things with them. So it really does revolve around my family and being a dad. Amazing. And obviously a husband as well. So that is the priority. Obviously that is the most important. And I always say, because everybody's always like, well, how do you have time for, you do all this stuff and things like that. And I do, and it does look busy on the outside. But I heard somebody talk about this the other day, and I don't remember who it was, but they talked about, instead of work-life balance, kind of calling it work-life integration.
I love that.
And so it's like, say you're, in this day and age, like you got for Christmas, for example, say we got 2 weeks off. This is great. I'm going to unplug for 2 weeks. Well, are you really completely unplugging for 2 weeks? Yes, of course you're not. You don't want to be, Christmas Day, doing work, things like that. But it's really, how are you doing little things to get yourself better at whatever you do? And honestly, your professional life, wherever that be, work or whatever, as we all know, that should be something you really enjoy, ideally.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So work-life balance, you kind of get this picture of I'm either working or I'm living my personal life, versus how do we integrate those a little bit? For example, I've taken my son just recently. This is great. My airline job, took him on a trip with me.
That is how we connected. You posted a photo of that on LinkedIn.
In the cockpit. Yes, I remember that.
And I commented and said, I love this. And you reached out to me. That
right.
is how
and
we
I talked about, I don't know if I mentioned in that post, but I think I said something about the work-life integration. And I just thought it was a great example, though. And I've taken, when I go in speaking events, I've taken my wife before, if it worked out. The kids are a little older now, so sometimes it's harder with their school and schedule, but trying to work it in and trying to show them what I do and things like that. So, but you asked about the Saturdays and you wake up, what do you do? That's what it revolves around is what is going on in my family. Now with sports, we're typically doing something on the weekends with their activity, which is just awesome. And then other things I just try to find, I'm big into working out, staying healthy and always doing things like that. I got into jiu-jitsu a couple years ago. So
Nice.
I love that now. I'm a blue belt, but still I consider myself a beginner. But always trying to stay active and things like that. So I think that's outside of professional stuff, what I, strive to be and strive to do. And my mom lives close to us now. So, helping her with things and being close to her and things like that. So, yep.
Okay.
Staying involved in the community and, as much as I can, my local outside the OTB, outside the perimeter town.
That's still local.
Yeah, right,
Local
right.
to
In
you.
Woodstock, Georgia. But being there and being involved in the community, how you can give back and things like that. So I'm constantly, I guess, trying to refine that and
Yes.
trying to find the perfect balance and what, what's going to work for me and
You
where I
hit
need
the
to get
microphone.
better.
I just have to comment.
I know,
on
right?
that 'cause
That's
we
one.
have to have it.
That's one. I don't want to say anything, but I think, right now that focus is, or the change I'm trying to make is, and I do this a lot anyway, when I am home, obviously with both my main jobs, traveling obviously is almost
Right.
exclusively on the road. Trying to, when I am home, is be up, in the morning, with the kids before they go to school and whether it's
present.
drive my daughter to school. She's in that age now where I'm not so cool anymore all the time, or, I'm
How's
not
that
always
even
the,
possible?
but for whatever reason, those drives is when she will, a lot of times we get the conversation started. So even if it's just 10, 15 minutes, I'm taking her to school and back or, or whatever it is, taking her to Starbucks on the way there and doing that. So that's kind of the thing I'm trying to do. And why I say trying to do it is because a lot of times in my schedule, if I finish a trip and I get in late at night, right? Get home late. Well, I do, again, health, kind of a sidebar, but a health standpoint. Several years ago, I read a book and it changed my life on how I viewed sleep. So
Yes,
making
so
sleep a
important.
priority. So
Yep.
I am very much big on striving to get that 8 hours. It doesn't always happen, but that's a big deal for me. So if I get in late and the kids are out at school and I may sleep in a little later and not see them. So, but going back to that is when I can enable making that time happen. Outside of that, I am a Christian, and so I do like to start every morning. And I fully honest, I don't always get to do this, and I don't always do it. But starting with a devotional, and then take some of the time to reflect on that, pray on that. And I don't know what it is, and I can't put my finger on it, but it seems like when I do that, most of the time, it's not that the amount of work changes. It just seems that everything just kind of flows a little better, if that makes sense, or just
There's science.
the struggles kind of
behind it.
just,
Yes.
they're still there, but they kind of just, I don't want to say make it easier, but they just kind of flow. You're kind of expecting it, and you're just moving. You're just kind of clicking a little bit and things like that. So that's also been the biggest, thing I've tried to reinforce and focus on. And then my reading, I love reading, but I'm one of these people that's a very slow reader. My wife can sit down and read like a whole book in a day. And I've always, since I was little, just been a slow reader. So also trying to carve out some time in the mornings. And I don't do all these things every morning, but trying to carve out some time, whether it's, read a little bit of a book I've been working on, or, go on to YouTube if there's something I'm trying to learn. Go, even like I talked about jiu-jitsu earlier, go watch some jiu-jitsu videos. Just, it's, take 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes just to try to get myself better at something else before I start digging into, emails or calls or whatever I am doing that day. So, but that's kind of been what I try to do in the mornings is, again, the main focus now is trying to be there when I can for my kids, especially during the school year.
Yep.
The devotions and keeping that up. And then whether it's, reading or something outside of professional life, getting yourself better at something. And to me, that just seems to, because as you know, what do we typically do? We start digging in right away. I got to get this done. I got to do this. And then what happens is you don't give time to yourself. And then before you know it, it's 4:30, everybody's home. Now you're going to, start doing everything else. And so I think it's critical to be very disciplined, in what you do, especially in the mornings, because that's typically for most people, that's kind of your time. Not everybody, but that's kind of your time to do that stuff and start the day. One thing I took from that world I came from as well, in a U.S. Air Force flying squadron, right, is there was that deep level, why we were so successful. I mean, there's a few things, but one of the biggest things, we had this deep level rooted camaraderie, right? And so, and it wasn't forced on us. It was just kind of the way that the culture was. But I think it bled over from, because we knew at the end of the day that one day we're going to be, we are going to be flying together, and we're going to have to count on each other.
Right.
And so that culture, it starts from day one of Air Force pilot training. As a young lieutenant, you're taught that, hey, yes, you all are going to be rank ordered when you graduate, but they used to always say, you don't graduate, your class graduates. Matter of fact,
I love that.
They drove that. It was when I went back to be an instructor, I experienced this as well. As a flight commander, you were essentially responsible for giving probably about 15 to 20 students at any one time, and all the instructors that were responsible. So you're leading 30 to 40 people typically in that role as a young captain. But your grade or your performance, let's say, when you finish pilot training, I would say it was probably majority of it was your daily flying. So how you performed and made decisions, and because every ride was graded. Part of it was academics, how you did a little more smaller portion of that, but also there was about a 20% ranking that went into your overall, it was what's called a flight commander ranking. And that was purely a subjective ranking that me and the other instructors would get together, and it had nothing to do with your technical skill set, how you did this was purely how well of a team player, leader, how well did you provide mutual support to your team? Because we knew how critical it was, and that could drastically change your ranking on how, which is ultimately what you decided, how you got to choose what you're going to go fly, what you're going to do in your career, because we knew how important that was. And that's why that grade was in there. But that's what I talk about in my keynotes, is that mutual support, and how do we embed that in organizations? Because really mutual support, we talk a lot about accountability in organizations, which is absolutely critical. But the most powerful form of accountability, and Harvard Business Review has done studies on this, is that peer level accountability. When people, colleagues, teammates hold themselves accountable. I don't even like to say hold themselves accountable. I like to say provided mutual support.
I love that.
Because you're backing each other up.
Yeah.
Because I remember, in a fighter squadron, flying in these flying squadrons, I wasn't worried if we were working at a task together, it could be flying or non-flying, just what we called our ground jobs, our admin jobs. If I was working with you in a task, Angela, I didn't want to not do it because I was worried about getting fired or,
you didn't want to let me down.
Exactly. I didn't want to be that person that was the weakest link on your team, because I didn't want to let you down. Because we probably hung out together outside of work. I probably know your family. We do all these events together. So it was a very work hard, play hard kind of mentality group. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that in a business organization, but how do you embed that mutual support? How do leaders really drive that so that their people are holding each other accountable and providing mutual support?
And
I think I'll pass this one on, because it's not just leadership. I think it's motivational. And when you first hear it, you're probably going to think, really? But it's from Nick Saban is the one who's I've heard say this. And I'm not an Alabama fan, but I thought it was a phenomenal, idea. And he said, don't be average.
Oh, I love. Okay.
Very
Tell us
simple,
more.
very to the point, right? And you first hear well, don't be average. Well, people say, well, you can't be perfect. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what it's saying. And if you listen to and talk about it more, you really think about it. And I've got it to where I tell my kids this now when they're working on something and they're like, even if it's just simple stuff around the house, like say they, finish a snack and they just leave their trash. I was like, hey, don't be average. Don't leave this here. Go. That's the easy thing to do. Get up and walk away. It's very simple to not be average and just throw your stuff away, right? But it goes back to when they're doing schoolwork or when they're doing any task or whether in their activities and things like that. I never expect them to be the best, kid in that on the field, the best student, anything like that. I'd love for that, but I don't expect that. But what I do expect is not to be average. You're putting in that extra effort. When you're doing your math homework, you're not just sloppily writing it down. Let's be neat about it, right? But I think that's important because, Nick Saban, he talked about this, and I think he was talking to a group of coaches or something, this event he was doing. And he said, look, when you get a kid that comes out for football and, he's okay, he's good, but he's just not going to that next level. He's not giving the extra effort. He's like, look, don't think there's something wrong with him. That's normal. It's normal for us as humans to be average, just to get by. Like I said earlier, we just want habit, want simple, right? Yeah. And so as a leader, when you say don't be average, you're really trying to, that's the beauty of leadership is, right? How do you motivate, inspire, drive people to be better than average, to really want them to be better and to not be average. And so I think that it's just so simple. I think don't be average it's not about being perfect, but it's, average is easy, right? Average is just getting by. So how do we drive our people? How do we set up organizations? How do we consider human factors, as we've talked about, to not be average, to drive those better results? Because at the end of the day, what is a leader's ultimate job? When it comes down to it, a leader's job is to drive better performance, period, dot, for that team, for the organization, for the people. Now, we can talk all day about how you do that, but that's the ultimate job of that leader. And so that's why I like that quote. I think it's just so, I was thinking of a few, but I think that one kind of is just very simple and an easy takeaway, I think.